To discuss the latest developments in the region, we can cross to Middle East political analyst Dan Glazebrook. He joins us now live from London. Thanks so much for being with us here on RT. Now, Hillary Clinton is concerned about emerging sectarian violence in post-revolutionary Arab states. Now, we saw the same scenario unfold in Iraq. Do you think she's fearful that there could be a repeat?
Well, I'm not sure fearful is exactly the right word to use, because the US has been the leading force fomenting sectarian violence in the region for some time. Hillary Clinton's list of 18 countries that are particularly religiously intolerant, contains 3 countries which are Saudi Arabia, Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, we have to ask ourselves, who brought religious intolerance and extremism to Afghanistan and Iraq? These countries, both of these countries, had secular governments that respected freedom to worship and freedom of religion until Western intervention deposed them. I'm talking about, of course, the communist government of Najibullah in Afghanistan in the 80s and the Baathists in Iraq until 2003. So this posing by the US as some kind of champion of religious tolerance is part of an exercise in ideological confusion designed to obscure the fact that the US has been the biggest supporter of religious intolerance around the world as part of a divide and rule strategy to keep third world peoples from uniting. And this is, of course, a strategy they inherited from the British Empire. Let's not forget that the aggressive anti-Shia ideology practiced by Al-Qaeda and the Saudi royal family is Wahhabism, which was nurtured and built up by the British in the 19th century in order to divide the Muslim world and weaken the Ottoman Empire. Now, this strategy worked very well for the British, who were eventually able to defeat the Ottomans and put in place the Jordanian and Saudi royal families, who are still in place to this day. So for the West to be now posing as this great force for religious tolerance is a disgusting joke, frankly, that we only fall for because of our deep ignorance of our own historic role in the region.
I've also read that you've written that there is some aim to disunite Africa, where there's a plan to set the Africans against the Arabs. Why? What's the reasoning behind that? What on earth would that achieve?
Well, of course, we have to look at Africa's role in the global economy. Since capitalism was invented, Africa has been crucial. It's been the engine of growth in the global economy. Firstly, of the slave labor system in Africa, providing labor for the plantations, the sugar, cotton plantations in America, that provided the capital that laid the basis for the Industrial Revolution, later for the minerals, the gold mines, and rubber plantations and so on in Africa itself. And more recently, the IMF has been extorting Africa for debt, and so on. So the real fear of the West is that Africa unites and is able to break free from this colonial grip that it's been in for hundreds of years. And who was the leading force behind uniting Africa was Libya under Gaddafi's rule. So Gaddafi was the main driving force behind founding the African Union in 2002. And his country was the main financial contributor to the 3 main big financial institutions of the African Union: the African Central Bank, the Investment Bank, and the African Monetary Fund. Between them, they would have posed a huge challenge to IMF hegemony, International Monetary Fund hegemony of Africa, and the currency that Libya was proposing, gold-backed dinar, would have been a huge challenge to the role of the dollar, pound, and the franc as the main currencies in Africa. So all of this is threatening it's a threat to Africa's subordinate position in the global economy.
Okay, let's just quickly talk about what's going on in Libya, just briefly. Obviously, the tribal tensions and also the religious intolerance going on, not just in Libya, but also throughout the region. Of course, the Western countries are very supportive of this Arab Spring at the start, and obviously we've heard some words of concern from Hillary Clinton now. But if the region does turn into uncontrollable violence, what next? I mean, will the Western world, NATO, be held accountable, or will we just see the whole thing disintegrating and nothing can be done about it?
Well, if the West is to be held accountable, it can only be done by the united action of the Global South. So I very much hope that does happen, and I think it's inevitable in the course of time that will happen. I hope it's sooner rather than later. But if you're talking about violence and so on, you're right, and it's interesting, people have talked about the role of Al-Qaeda in Libya and Al-Qaeda affiliates working in Libya. Of course, it's important to remember that there are two kind of main strands within Al-Qaeda. There's the strand that's interested in resisting imperialism, and then there's a strand that's more interested in waging fratricidal kind of sectarian warfare against people from other faiths. And what we're seeing in Libya, the role of the rebels has been they've been playing into the hands of the West divide and rule strategy and US divide and rule strategy. Here, not so much on religious grounds. In Iraq, Al-Qaeda have been waging a war against Shia Muslims, which fits very well into the West divide and rule agenda. In Libya, it's been more about the racial divides. There's no big religious divisions in Libya. The divide is a racial one, and the rebels from day one of the uprising, from before the intervention, this uprising has been characterized by racist violence. On the second day of the uprising, 50 African migrants were slaughtered by the rebels, and this is all justified in the media by nonsense about African mercenaries, which Amnesty International have already comprehensively demolished. There were no African mercenaries. What's going on is the rebels are waging warfare against the black Libyan population and African migrant workers. And when you ask how does this fit into NATO's plan, NATO want a government that will disunite Africa, that will draw North Africa away from its southern neighbours. So it's very important for NATO that the government is a racist one, but will not continue with this Libyan project of uniting Africa. So it's no mistake that this uprising has been characterised by racist violence. This is part of the plan to tear away North Africa from southern Africa. All
right, Dan, plenty of other areas we could have talked about, but sadly time is upon us. Interested to hear what you have to say. Dan Glazebrook joining us live there in London. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.